right, everybody, we got Brett Kissel here, the new king of Canadian country. And we're going to talk a little bit about his new album, What Is Life, sophomore US album. Brett, I mean, what's there to be said, man? You've got gold certified albums, platinum singles, and gold singles. You've got your CCMA award that you recently got. You got the you've been at the top of the Canadian country music charts. You won the Juno Award, that's kind of like the Canadian Grammys for those who don't know here in the States. So you're really doing it right now, my friend.
More lucky than anything, Sean. I'm very, very, very lucky.
Yeah. I've been listening to your music this week. I was driving around and I was like, I'm gonna put on some Brett Kissel and listen and just get in the mood before our interview. And you've got some really great music, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about the music, the new album, and everything that you've accomplished. But before we do, why don't you take us back and just let us know how Brett got into music?
Well, I always appreciate getting an opportunity to talk about my upbringing and my true passion for country music, because I grew up on a farm. I mean, it's literally going to be, I'm going to describe a country song to you, but I grew up on a cattle ranch. It's been in my family for over 100 years. So all we did, I mean, we were just a long line of hard workers. In 1910, my great-great-grandparents, they immigrated from the Ukraine, and they heard that there was talk of war. And so they said, yeah, we're going to GTFO here. And they got on a boat and they made their way to Canada. So two brothers, one made his way to New York City, and then one made his way to Halifax, Canada, and then took the train out to the prairies of Alberta. And for $10, my great-great-grandfather got 100 acres. And so I have that deed, actually. I'll show it to you. I've got that deed from our family framed here in my music office.
Wow, that's so cool.
I'm so proud of my heritage in Canada, and the fact that as my family got into farming and ranching, that's just what you did. This work ethic and this rural way of life came together and has been passed on now for generation to generation. And this year, especially in the year of the pandemic, I'm very, very proud. My wife and I, we were able to buy back into the farm. And so we can carry it on for another generation. Our kids would be the 6th generation. So when I write songs about, the fields, when I write songs about the land, when I write songs about a hard day's work, or sing songs about how much I love how I grew up in this small town, rural atmosphere, it's the truth, because I do have country running through my blood.
Yeah, it's funny. First of all, that deed is very cool. What year did you say that was from? Because it totally has the look of antiquity, that it makes it like a work of art. So it's awesome that you have it framed like that.
Yeah, 1910. So the cattle ranch where my family still is, I even got it tattooed on my heart. So I'm just so proud of my roots and my upbringing.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like with a country artist, growing up on a ranch, that's like your street cred. It's like if you're a rocker or a rapper, you might want to say you grew up on the streets. For a country artist, it's perfect to say you grew up on a ranch, So you really got it in your blood.
And the more Yellowstone, I binged Yellowstone this year.
Oh man, so did I, dude.
I'm just looking at the Dutton Ranch and I'm thinking, like, that is my dad and my grandpa to a T. I mean, we don't have horses on our ranch anymore, but we're proud. We got a lot of land and cattle and big operations. Nobody goes to the train station if you do our family wrong. We just don't do business with you anymore. Whereas John Dutton makes sure you disappear and you never come back. But I love it. And that's what this whole album was about, Sean, was really getting back to my roots and writing songs with maybe a little bit more integrity, and recording songs with more integrity, honesty, authenticity, and peeling back a couple of layers that I'd never done before in the States, or of course in Canada.
Yeah, I did notice that. And before we talk about your music, I just got to say, me and my fiance binged watched Yellowstone. Like a couple friends of ours recommended it, and we watched that. What is it? 3 seasons that they have, 2 or 3 seasons, and we watched all 3 seasons within a matter of weeks. So good. It reminds me, if you haven't seen it, What it reminded me of was Sons of Anarchy on a ranch, and that's what I told my my fiance, and then I came to realize that the show is actually produced by one of the same producers who did Sons of Anarchy. So
Well,
there's,
what a great thing to pick up on.
yeah.
Obviously, you've got an eye for that that kind of talent. That
Yeah,
is
it's,
really cool.
it's one of those things where it's just hyper dramatic, every single
Yeah.
episode, like so crazy things happen, and it's like very family based, and so I was like, yeah, this has the same vibe. But they actually give it to the bikers in that show on one episode, so that was kind of fun to see.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I've early in my career, I would play a lot of rodeos, and anytime the bikers and the rodeo guys would get after it, those would be some pretty crazy brawls. I was a part of two giant brawls in the early days of my career. If you really want to talk about bringing it backwards here,
Yeah,
I'll there was one actually between two ethnic groups. We have so many indigenous people where I grew up in, a true First Nations presence. So many of my friends, as the Saddle Lake Cree Nation and St. Paul, my hometown, were side by side. So many of my friends grew up in Saddle Lake. Yet in a lot of these small town rodeos, you'd have a divide between often, some of the cowboys and some of the people who are from the, indigenous communities. And so there was a
right.
big brawl that broke out between both sides as I'm singing probably Brand New Man by Brooks and Dunn, or maybe Dust on the Bottle. I'm just trying to entertain as a 15-year-old. And there's like 20 guys just going at it, and blood and beer just spilling on the floor. And then there was a big one when a couple bikers came to an event I did in Fort Assiniboine, Alberta. And I just turned 18. I was throwing back a couple beers during the intermission of one of my dance sets. And I guess these bikers and these cowboys went after it. And we had to call the show as the RCMP and the Mounties showed up. And oh, yeah, it was wild times. And I was just another Saturday night in Alberta. Yet, as I think about this now, 12 years later, I'm 30. I'm like, that was some crazy shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I was trying to explain what Yellowstone was to some friends of mine, and I was like, it's kind of interesting because it's modern day, but it's kind of like modern day cowboys and Indians a little bit, you know what I mean? Like so
Oh, yeah.
but I think they do a good job of kind of respecting the point of view of both sides, and but it's interesting to hear that even in Europe bringing it was like that in Alberta. So I guess that there's some truth to that, huh? Because
It
you
was.
don't see much of, I mean, in Southern California, I would say, we don't get a lot of that, you know what I mean? So it's interesting to hear that there is some of that kind of history still taking place.
Oh, very much so. I mean, in Canada, we're very proud of our roots. I've said that before, us personally, but also I think in Canada we do a really, really great job. We could always do a better job, and we're learning, but we do a great job paying tribute to the First Nations families that were the original Canadians. I mean, Canada was named after obviously an Indigenous word, so we're really, really proud of that heritage. And some of the entrepreneurs that I look up to the most are some of the chiefs who have figured out a way how to pull oil out of the ground, run successful casinos, hotels, and operations very similar to Yellowstone. And these are the multimillionaires. And I'm thinking, absolutely, like, I'm really inspired by one chief in particular, a friend of mine named Chief Billy Morin. And he's in his 30s, yet is kind of the grand chief of all of Treaty 7. So just Google it, or anybody listening, just Google it. It's a fascinating part of our province. And this guy in his early 30s is just rocking and rolling, and is as relevant and as smart as like Dwayne the Rock Johnson is to Hollywood, just thinking outside the box. Chief Billy Morin is the definition of a beauty. And I hope you are recording this, right? Because I want to be like, hey, so I'm talking to an American podcast here, and I'm singing your praises.
Yeah, let him know you gave him a shout out, and it sounds like a crazy story. So now that we had our little digression into that topic, I did want to say, you were talking about the authenticity of your music. And I was really noticing that. And I was thinking about mentioning that during this interview, because you have some interludes. And I mean, just the name of your new album, What Is Life? You know what I mean? And you have just like this whole interlude on the new album where you just, it's kind of just a narrative. It's just you talking like, hey, this has been thinking about what life is all about. You know, and you bring up some things and say, you know, I've really come to find that it's about family, and you know, the older I get, the more you realize that too. Those things that are really important in life. You know, if
Absolutely.
you know, what certain things can happen in your life that really give you perspective. For example, maybe a pandemic or something like that. You
Yeah.
might put into perspective what those things that you really care about. So tell us a little bit about the process that went behind thinking about, because obviously it felt to me like you were really trying to open up, which I think, you know, sometimes artists will tell you to do, like you got to get more personal, you got to be vulnerable. So was that something you were thinking of consciously when you were making this album?
You know, it's a great question. There's a lot to unpack there, but to simplify it, it was a conscious decision that if I'm going to peel back some layers, if I'm going to open up by going deep down, you know, inside, now would be the time. However, some of the things that ended up coming out of the album, the songs that were written, or the perspectives that I shared were more by accident than anything, or because some people don't believe in accidents, true, you know, divine intervention, you know, from the universe, maybe guiding me in that way, saying, you know what, you're doing the right thing. This is the right path to go down. So the opening monologue from this record came at pretty much at the end of the record. It was not thought of to be the starting point or something I wanted to do. I just had all these songs, and I felt that maybe similar to, and I don't get too artsy here, but similar to maybe a yoga session, or similar to a conversation with a life coach. What you do is you set your intention. So when I wanted to set the intention for the record, the only way I could do that is if I spoke. And if I asked the question to anybody who chose to listen on Apple or Spotify or YouTube or whatever, and I would simply ask the question, what is life? What really is it? What are we here to do? And what are we learning? So with all that being, you know, with all that being said, I just think that it's a very unique way to kick off a record, and something I don't know if I've heard before. I'm sure it's been done before, but nothing that, you know, comes to recent memory for me. So with all that being said, I'm really excited that for the most part, people are really digging that concept off the top of the record.
Yeah, and as far as the songs go, you got some great songs on there, and as with a lot of great country music, you got some really fun wordplay going on. And you know, one of the first tracks is you know, making a life, not a living. You know, and
Yeah.
I love that. I love it's so simple, and you know, it's great wordplay. Tell us a little bit about the inspiration for that song.
Well, when we talk about the universe, you know, kind of guiding me down the right path, uh, I got that song pitched to me on my 30th birthday. So I'm out on the farm that we just talked about. I'm with my kids. We're riding on our quads. And my friend Stephen Lee Olson, who's an incredible songwriter, has written big hits for Keith Urban, and the list goes on. He sent this to me, said, "Happy birthday, buddy. Here's a song. If anybody's going to love this song, it's going to be you. What do you think?" So I listened to it, and it was definitely the vibe, and it was who I was surrounded by. It was the fact that I was in an incredible mood because it was my birthday. But I wrote him back and I said, "Buddy, this song is so great. It's like you took the words out of my mouth, the ink out of my pen, the thought out of my head, you know, the feeling out of my heart. Like, I don't know how you did this, but this is me. So not only do I love it, but I promise you I'm going to record it. Not only am I going to record it, but this will be my first single, and I'm going to base my entire record around this song." To which he texted back, Sean, and he said, "You can't do that. You can't just say that. Like, he's an artist in his own right. And
Uh-huh.
Sean, you know this being a part of the business. I need to run this shit past my manager, my publicist, my record label, my producer. I can't just make this claim
Right.
on a random Thursday or Saturday, whatever day it was." Yet I
Right.
didn't. I stayed true to my word. So if you go line by line down that song, which I know you have, I think anybody who listens to it can say, you know what? I agree to absolutely everything that this song says and everything that this song stands for. So because of that, I think we have a real winner.
Yeah, totally. It was reminding me because I was just having a conversation about an interview that I love with Bob Marley, and the interview guys asking him, the interviewer saying, "Hey, are you a rich man?" And he's like, "What do you mean by rich?" And he's like, "You got a lot of money in the bank. You got, a lot of fancy possessions." And he was like, "These things don't make you rich." He's like, "I'm rich in life." And I feel like that's the message of your
Yeah,
of the song. Be
100%.
rich in life. Don't bank is great too, but that can help you be rich in life sometimes. But the more important thing is making sure you have a good life.
Well, for sure. And I mean, and what better time than this past year, these past 13 months, than to take really good stock of the things that you have, the memories that you've made, and how intentional are you going to be with your time moving forward? That's another big question that a lot of people are getting from listening to this album. And that's why I believe that it's really it's my most important work that I've ever done. I love everything I've done in the past, but this is just a kind of a new level of understanding or a new level of perspective and true care and thought that I put into this record. So, I mean, if anybody has followed me on Spotify and they've heard previous songs of mine, I hope you love it. I really do. But if you decide to dive deep into this entire project, not just one song, but the entire project, you may just find that each one of the songs that I've written or recorded for this project could be a potential answer to the question, what is life? Is it about reminiscing? Is it about looking to the future? Is it about being in the present moment? Is it about fun? Is it about throwing back a cocktail every now and then? Is it about understanding that, just as you said, Sean, it's about the riches that you have as opposed to the possessions that you have? So there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer.
Right. And I love what you say about intentionality, because I feel like as you were saying it, it made me remember and realize how important it is to live intentionally, to be moving in a direction. Speaking of bikers, they say if you're riding a motorcycle, you're supposed to look where you're going. You're not supposed to look at the turn. You're supposed to be looking at where you're turning to. Because if you look at the turn, you're gonna nosedive or something like that. But
Exactly.
you're supposed to look at, and even with cars, they say to do that too when you're driving on the road. Look where you're going, not like don't look at the turn. So I think that's so important. I think sometimes people don't do it because to commit to something is to open up the possibility of failure. So sometimes people, I think, like to have an open mind, which can be useful sometimes to play some jazz in life. But other times, for those bigger things, you really need to be intentional if you want to start moving towards them.
Well, it was an interesting quest that I've been on and a very interesting risk to take, because even though I love these songs and I love, what especially the current single, stands for, because I was leading more with heart than letting a hit drive me, I knew that there could be a chance that these songs don't resonate, or these songs maybe aren't the best fit for country radio. And so every decision I'd ever made in the past, and it's a pretty special career that I've been fortunate enough to have, that every other decision I made was me chasing a trend, or me saying, this is exactly what Blake is doing right now. This is so cool. Let's do this. Or I remember Thomas Rhett had a song very similar to this. It worked. Let's do something similar. Or FGL is really, hitting this certain lane of country music and it's really working on radio. Let's make sure that we have some content that really supports where the direction of country is going right now, as opposed to me just sitting back and saying, hold it. All of these things work, but maybe, just maybe, I need to march to the beat of my own drum. And in making that decision, it could have crashed and burned. But so far, and we're only, a couple of weeks in, but so far, isn't it interesting, Sean, how the time that I decide I'm going to let my heart drive the decision making, I actually have come across the biggest hit of my career in Make a Life Not a Living.
Yeah, I was noticing that song is double triple, you know, as far as Spotify goes. It looks like the streams of any other song that you've released. So I mean, and in, you know, only a couple weeks. So
Yeah, so I think it's got a lot of runway left, you
yeah.
know?
Definitely, it's a great song. And I'm paraphrasing one of the others. One of the really other great lines I heard in one of the other songs. It was like the best bad idea or something like. And I was
Yeah.
listening to your whole catalog, so I'm not sure if that's off the newest album. Is it?
No, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
So the title is better bad
Better
idea.
bad idea.
And
I love that idea. I love that idea for a lyric.
well, I can't take credit for it, but I'm
Right.
so happy that I was able to run with it when Dave Thompson, good buddy of mine, and a shout out to him, he got his very first number one with two other Canadians, as a matter of fact, Patricia Conroy and Madeline Merlot, for a song they wrote called Champagne Night, that Lady A cut from Songland. So it went number one, and I'm really proud of his recent success. As that song was going up the charts, he texted me the song title, Better Bad Idea. And I said, it's basically telling the story of somebody who's the best, worst influence. And
Exactly.
that, without
Yeah.
question, was my wife in the early days who got me out of my shell, and me being this rule follower, good farm kid, had this incredibly a girl who didn't just think outside the box, a girl who just destroyed the box and was without question the best, worst influence on me. I love her to death. We've been married 10 years, have three incredible kids. And she is the one who, without question, would look at a trespass sign and cut the wire so that we could climb a water tower or do a cannonball off of a bridge into a river, which we've done that shit, and look at me and be like, I don't think we should do this. And she would say, nah, I can't think of a better bad idea. Yeah, like literally, it's a song for her.
Yeah, such a great idea. You know, such a artistic way to say mischief can be fun sometimes, you know. And
Oh yeah, it's you. I'm sure you've done your fair share of stuff. I've done my fair share of stuff. That is, to a degree, maybe one of the great secrets to life is pushing the envelope a little bit.
I totally agree and totally have been there. Yes, sir. So I think we jumped a little ahead. So I would love to hear, and I think a lot of the aspiring musicians would love to hear, and I feel like we got a taste of it with some of your early day stories of show fights between different factions in in where you were growing up. But I would love to hear how you went from a guy living on a ranch, living in the fields, to playing small shows, to opening up for Garth Brooks, or playing with Garth Brooks and playing, hundreds of shows a year. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went from there, point A to point B?
Well, I find my trajectory in my career is very similar to that of an athlete. And the reason why I relate it to that is because as a kid who just plays hockey, who grew up as a little kid playing hockey, and then before you know it, okay, you just graduate to another league. You go from novice to peewee, then peewee to bantam, and bantam to midget, and then midget to AAA, and AAA to junior, and then you get drafted to the NHL, but you're in the minors for a couple years, and then you get called up there, and before you know it, you're playing on a Stanley Cup winning team. So even though to a degree, I don't know if I've necessarily won my Stanley Cup yet, although I've related some of the awards that I've been able to win to a Stanley Cup in my business, especially here in Canada.
Definitely.
It's crazy to look back on my timeline and maybe pinpoint one particular moment. But for me, it was always chop wood, carry water, one foot in front of the other. That's all I did. So one gig would lead to another thing. So I played this talent show when I'm 7 years old at my school. And then one of the grandpas of one of the other kids, he's a local musician, and he says, well, why don't you come out and play the rodeo, and we'll get you up and play with my band. So I get up, and only song I know how to sing is Sold by John Michael Montgomery. And, I'm a 7-year-old, and kind of bring the house down because it's kind of cute, when a 7-year-old sings Sold at the Grundy County auction.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, I'm 9 years old, and now, Bob's Ford or John's Chevrolet in town say, hey, we've got a barbecue for a summer send off and a customer appreciation. Why don't you come and sing for a half an hour? We'll pay you $50. So I'm 9 years old and I get paid $50. And holy shit, it's $50. Like, oh my God. So I play a half an hour worth of Johnny Cash songs. And then before you know it, a guy from Edmonton, the big, city where 1 million people live in Canada, and say, hey, I've got a studio, you know what? And talk to my mom and dad, and, for $2,000, we can make a cassette for your son. So I'm 11 years old and I make a cassette, all cover songs, and then I sell it. Well, I wind up selling 500 copies at $10 a piece. Okay, well, that's $5 grand. Then I sell 1,000 copies. Then I sell 3,000 copies just by playing little rodeos around. So 3,000 copies at $10 a piece is $30,000 gross. And you're like, okay, well, let's buy some equipment. So I buy some sound equipment. Now I'm 13 years old and I've got enough of a repertoire to do an entire dance for the Chuck Wagon Racing or the Alberta Teachers Association, Christmas ball. And I just play all these country tunes. Now I'm 16 and now I've got some songs that are playing locally on radio and get a couple local nominations for the local award show. And before you know it, I'm not going to school anymore. I'm doing everything on correspondence because just like an athlete would, I'm playing in junior now. And if this goes well, I can make it to the National Hockey League. Well, sure enough, then you get a manager, and then the manager says, hey, kid, you got some talent, and then starts teaching you about sponsorship and about revenue, and you better write some songs. If you really want to be somebody, you go to Nashville. So I start going to Nashville when I'm 16 years old, and then I moved there when I'm 19 years old, and then Bob Doyle is Garth's manager. Bob signs me to a management contract and a publishing deal. Now all of a sudden I'm writing with Tim Nichols, who wrote Live Like You Were Dying. And then I'm writing with Craig Wiseman, who's written, 100 number one songs. And then I've got a this, and then I get a record deal. Then you get a record deal. Then you win a Juno. Then you win a Juno. Then you open for Garth Brooks. And then you're on the podcast with you, Sean, and living the dream. Like one thing led to another.
Woo! I got to say, Brett, I think that was maybe the best summary of a career that anyone has ever given in such a succinct amount of time. That was awesome. And it really does sound like you had the just kind of the diagonal line slowly trending upwards the entire time.
And to a degree, for sure. However, I look at all the landmines that I avoided, and I'm so grateful I had great mentorship and leadership and incredible family and community members to avoid those landmines. But then I can distinctly look at some of the landmines I stood on top of, and I got blown up and had to recover financially or recover musically for a couple of months and lick my wounds and realize that was a stupid decision or whatever, but you learn these lessons along the way. So was it like this? Yes. But there were a couple times where I hit a landmine and I was doing a nosedive straight back to the minor leagues or straight back to junior or straight back to my hometown, where I probably wasn't going to make anything of myself. But you just try to pick up the pieces and learn from your mistakes. And I'm grateful that I had great coaches along the way who would prop me up when I needed it, but even more importantly, kick my ass when I needed it.
Yeah. So more like maybe the stock market where it's long-term growth, but there's a lot of peaks and valleys.
See, now that is the best way to describe it. Absolutely. Right. There's a lot of daily losses where you lose your bacon. But if you look at the stock over a 3-year period or a 10-year period, you're like, it's been a steady rise.
Right. And where are you based now? Are you still in Nashville? Did you head back to Canada? Where are you living now?
So we usually, every year of my life, I go back and forth all the time. My residence has been in America. It's been in Nashville. I've got a great spot in Germantown. I love Nashville. During the pandemic, I said, hey, you know what? Maybe this is a sign from the universe for me to go back home to Canada, spend time with my grandparents, reconnect with my roots, be on the farm, go chase cows, go hunt deer, go fishing, all that stuff. Because if I'm going to write on a Zoom call with somebody, if I can't get in the room, I may as well write, songs from Canada. And now I can't wait to get back to America, but the border is closed and I can't leave. So it's like, I just got to figure it out. So I'll be back in America soon.
Yeah, I recently read, I think that more people moved home over the past year, in whatever it was, in like the 25 to 35 year age group, than since like 50 years or something like that. And it makes sense, like you said, if you can't do
Yeah.
other things, might as well hang out with some family maybe, or get back to your hometown. And because a lot of people leave their hometown to go pursue things that they can't do elsewhere. But if you can't do it anyways, then might as well say hi to the family for a little while.
You're right. And a lot of people did that from a spiritual and energetic standpoint. But my heart also breaks for a lot of people who had to retreat and come back home based on, hey, I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to start this business. And we
Totally.
know that small business was destroyed. Or, hey, I'm a country singer, I'm going to go try my luck in Nashville. And then a pandemic happens and you can't get a meeting. So there's been a lot of struggles. A lot of my friends have struggled for sure. But you know what? One of the best parts about having a home or a place that you can go back to is that the people, the vibe. And if you've got a great network of support from your family, your friends, your community, then what better place to regroup? And I have to admit, I'm very grateful that I've been able to regroup here.
It's so right. It's one of those things. Those people who do have a support system are so blessed in that way, because it really can make the difference in those types of hard times.
Oh yeah, and we've all been through it. Nobody's immune or hasn't felt the effects of the last 13 months in this pandemic. So with all that being said, I think that there are going to be a lot of artists in the coming months, and we've already heard it, that this is going to culturally shape music for the rest of time. This era, this 2019, 20, and 21 era, and some of these songs, you look at Thomas Rhett's Be a Light, or you look at Undivided by Tim McGraw and Tyler Hubbard. To me, whether that song goes number one or not, it's that song that's probably going to last for dozens of years, because people will remember what that song stood for. So it's a very interesting time culturally for us in the music business.
That's a really cool thought, because I think we've been lucky, our generation, and we've had a few kind of really nasty things happen along the way. The 2008 financial crisis was pretty bad, but a lot of the previous generations, they had some really crazy hard times. If it was the Great Depression, or if it was like World War I or II, or the Vietnam War, or being drafted, and so I feel like, at least in my adult life, in my entire life, this is probably the biggest societal hardship that has happened. So it's and if hardship makes character and makes great art, then maybe we'll be seeing some really great art after this, like you said, or even during it already.
And trip that we do, and the worst to think that this something that would storm for a little bit longer. But however you choose to look at it, there's something that can truly is everybody's perspective, and something that I've really tried to over the last year, and that is trying to search for the silver linings in everything. Now, my revenue was not just cut in half or 2/3 or 3/4, but my industry got a what?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's trying to see the silver linings during this time, and I'm not sure if but I'm actually in a band called the Eiffels. I was actually trying to pen a song that had something to do with silver linings, just because of what else can you write about right now, right? And
Oh, exactly.
but I just wanted to say, Brett, you've done a great job. I mean, you put out an epic album, maybe, and like you said, this might be the best album you've ever put out, the most successful, anyways. So how about that for a silver lining during a pandemic?
Well, hey, exactly. I mean, so much of that stuff is completely out of my hands, but I'm really, really grateful with the response so far. And of course, I mean, social media, it's tough to get tied into social media, which is a whole nother conversation in itself. But you know what? If I look to Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and see people saying, hey, you know, this is really strong or this is very special. And especially, Sean, when people will choose songs that, you know, that maybe aren't the singles, that are a little bit left of center, and they're saying, by the way, this song in particular, I love. That makes me so happy to know that every song on the record can have life, as opposed to how most records go. You have 10 songs, 2 singles, 8 songs kind of hit the cutting room floor, and 2 songs rise to the top, and that's it. This is a very well-rounded project and body of work. So I hope everybody enjoys it from top to bottom.
Yeah. So, Brett, if for those listening, if you haven't heard it already, check out What Is Life. It's got some fun songs. It's got some serious introspective songs. It's got Brett, you know, opening the record, like you said, really questioning what is life. So it was a fun ride to take. I was driving all around past week, and I was listening to the record. It was a fun ride to take with you. You know, you've had a hell of a career so far. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners would love to know, if you had one piece of advice for aspiring artists, what would it be?
I would just talk about hard work and understanding that the minute you get a manager and you think that now your manager can start doing the work, no. Now you need to work twice as hard, because your manager is going to work, and now you got to continue to work. You can't take a break. Then when you get an agent, you got to keep working. When you get a record label and a record deal, that's when you have to work even harder. So every step that you actually climb on the ladder, you may think that that's your opportunity to finally rest. But this is not a business where I think you can rest. I think this is a business where you have to find a 5th gear, then a 6th gear, then a 7th. Or if you're built like Garth Brooks or Beyonce or Bruce Springsteen, you find a 10th gear, you find a 12th gear, a 20th.
You find gear. You find a jet to jump on or something. Switch
exactly,
vehicles.
True. So I mean, it's hard work pays off, which is not unique to the music business either. If you want to be the best rancher in the world, the harder you work, you know, the more successful you're probably going to be. If you want to work in the oil business, the harder you work. You want to work in the financial business, and the harder you work. If you want to be a podcaster, the harder you work. If you want to be, it doesn't matter. If you want to be a baker, the harder you work, you know, the more successful you're going to be. So I've always understood that I'm not going to be as good a guitar player as Brad Paisley. I'm not going to be as great a songwriter as Dolly Parton. I'm not going to be as great an entertainer as Garth Brooks, or as great a singer as Shay Mooney from Dan and Shay. Like, so I just got to work hard. That's all I can do.
Yeah, you got to be the best. You got to be a competition to your former self, right?
I agree.
And I remember a kid in college once told me, I was telling him I used to like drawing, but then I saw a couple people who were better at me than drawing, and I kind of like said I'll never be that good or whatever. And he's like, well, that's a kind of a self-defeating attitude, because there will always be someone better than you at anything. You know what I mean? You're not gonna. I mean, even if you're the best at the moment, there'll be someone that, you know, right behind you who might, you know, take that spot. So never quit, because there might be someone better at you, and no one can be Brett as good as Brett can be Brett. You know what I mean? And so you got your own thing, you know?
Well, exactly. And you know what? Everybody has their own path, and everybody has an opportunity to go and be successful. You know, I've just found that the harder I work, the more cool things, you know, can fall in my lap. Oprah said it, you know, she doesn't believe in luck. It's hard work and opportunity colliding.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. I just try my best to always dedicate time and effort and energy and hard work to my craft.
Well, I think that's really great advice, really valuable advice. And you don't hear that all the time. And I think it's important, because setting that expectation that the further you come along in this industry, the more work it's going to be, because it's not going to be like, oh, you get to catch your breath here. It's going to be like you said, we're going to have to run faster here. And I think some of the best influences in my life have taught me good work ethic. You know, I was working at a recording studio for a while, and I used to think like, oh, the way they achieve certain things in the studio is they have certain plugins or certain secret sauces that I don't know about, that they probably just throw on there. And that may be true every now and then, but other things I would see the producer in there, and he would just spend, an hour on something, on like a moment of a song. And I'd be like, oh, so it's just hard work, it's just more time. And that's
Exactly.
given me a lot of insight and a lot of wisdom, I think, over the years.
And what a great example that you can cling to and you can tell others about on a regular basis, or whenever anybody would ask you that same question. And one of the unique things is that even though you work hard and even though you put in more work, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And that's another reality too. I mean, it's probably on a fridge magnet, or some grandpa has probably got it on a t-shirt, in Myrtle Beach. Like, literally, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So for me, I could literally put in 24 straight hours and it just wouldn't faze me, because I love that I get to do this. And a producer, in the example that you just gave, are the ones that are spending so much time in the studio while the artist sang his vocals and got back on the bus and went to do another show. The producer is there for probably 36 straight hours, not sleeping, throwing back coffee and Red Bull, just to get that right moment, exactly as you described. So that's work ethic. And I really value that.
Yeah. And when work ethic combines with passion, like you said, we have endless amounts of energy for the things we love. And I was just talking about it with my fiance's parents yesterday, over the weekend. And I was saying, I'm not really a morning person, but if I am excited about what I'm going to do that day, I could wake up at 4 a.m. or whatever it is. You know what I mean? I can wake up, however, if I'm stoked about what I'm doing, I got energy. Bring it back.